It's the 2nd of July 2024 and I'm with my dear old friend Martin Wimbush. Martin, tell us about your early days.
My little life. I've always thought of acting as a kind of playing. When you look at school children running around in a playground, their energy and their imagination, and it's just naturally there. As you play more, you begin to feel there's more attention being given to you, and you start to think about the process of playing. I suppose when I was 10, I got the bug. I was asked to be in a little play, and there were 10 girls and one me. They wanted a young chap. So I thought, that's all right. I liked that early attention. Then my family moved back to Teddington, having been in Bristol for a while, and I joined Teddington Theatre Club, which was a very prodigious and lively amateur club, and I got really involved in that. I went to a school where the music teacher and the English teacher were very much into Gilbert and Sullivan. One of my first big appearances was in Iolanthe playing a fairy. I was a very dainty little fairy. Then I had a big success doing Sir Despard Murgatroyd in Ruddigore. I wanted to get into drama school and I managed to get a place at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in the performers course in 1967. I felt a need. I've always said that if you want to be an actor, don't be an actor. But if you need to be an actor, then go ahead and do it. My mother was incredibly enthusiastic and did give me a great deal of help. My father was very sceptical, but at the same time they gave me that chance to go to Guildhall. So I was very pleased when I was really motoring in the late 70s that he saw that before he died quite early. As soon as I got to Guildhall, you come in with this enormous enthusiasm and you're told to forget everything that you've learnt. They say, this is where you start. But by that time, you see, I was pretty well living at the Old Vic in the Gods, watching these wonderful actors like Olivier Richardson, Gielgud and Redgrave. I remember particularly Sir Michael Redgrave as Uncle Vanya with Olivier as Astroff, and I was absolutely thrilled. So that, coupled with my natural enthusiasm for it, drove me and created this self-confidence in me to push through some of those criticisms and self-doubts that I may have had as a young actor. Looking at myself, I've always been quite sensitive, which is a blessing and also sometimes a handicap, because it means that you're sensitive to criticism and sensitive when you don't get the role that you really want. But you have to have that self-belief, and that is often given to you by your peers. I've always had that self-belief that I had something to give, and that self-knowledge that I wanted to get into all these different characters. There's a lovely quote, I think, from Edith Evans, who said, "I seem to have an awful lot of people inside me." And I think I do have a lot of people inside me. And dare I say, all writers have a lot of people. Any creative person has a lot of people inside them. And it always excited me and perhaps engaged me when I was cast in character parts that I would not be usually associated with. I remember playing a very tough Cockney soldier in The Plough and the Stars. A lot of people were very surprised at that, and that always is a lovely sense of excitement when I'm acting. That triggers a memory when I jump right forward to one of the last plays that I did, a play by David Hampshire called Funny Turns. And I was playing an impresario, and I wanted to play this impresario in a very tight, hard, Cockney way. And I believe I succeeded, and it surprised a lot of people. And I could feel the audience really connected to me. These are the experiences that the commercial theatre doesn't allow you. They tend to bracket me in a particular way, which is very upper class, and in my early years playing a lot of silly-ass comedy roles. I suppose I was of that generation that had this wonderful experience in repertory theatre, the last really of that generation. After Guildhall, I joined various companies. One was an education company that went round schools presenting plays. Then I went to the Empire Theatre, Sunderland, to do a rep season. Androcles and the Lion and Jane Eyre, playing bits and pieces and doing everything and everything. In those days you had to be an assistant stage manager, so you had to work behind the stage as well as on it. I went to Scarborough to do some funny shows in the summer season there, and then that led on to being contracted to the Theatre Royal York as an acting ASM again, and I spent a year there really learning my trade. Michael Caine said you have to be a magpie as an actor. You have to look and constantly be curious about life, not just the way and how people move and behave and all that, but you have to look at other actors and you have to pick and choose the best bits that they have and perhaps store them in your memory and develop them and learn from them. And then from that you develop your own style of acting and your own way of presenting. Because there's not that kind of training ground now, the apprenticeship that we all had in those days. The fact that companies could bring you in. Now it's a much more difficult area. It's fringe work, really. And of course, if you're lucky, you can get a salary, but as we know in fringe theatre, it's very poorly paid. So you have to really have another area of employment. I'd spent the 70s, as I say, in rep. And then I think in 1977, I had my television debut in Upstairs, Downstairs. It was one of the episodes about the general strike and the last of the series of Upstairs, Downstairs. And I played a friend of James Bellamy, played by Simon Williams. I had some lovely scenes in that, and I developed a really nice character. I remember when I went in to this large hall, and there they all were in a group round the table, and I was a little nervous being a young actor. Dear Gordon Jackson came up to me. He said, "Hello, Martin. How are you? My name's Gordon Jackson. You're Martin Wimbush, aren't you? Come with me and I'll introduce you to the cast." That was so nice of Gordon, and he was such a sweet man, and he was very much my mentor during that time. As was Simon Williams, I remember on the set. I was nervous in front of camera, but he said, "Martin, all these people round this camera, they don't exist, all right? All you've got to think about in this scene is you and me. That's all, just you and me." And that, again, was a wonderful piece of advice. And that led on to a lovely piece in Glittering Prizes. That was a wonderful series written by a clever writer called Frederick Ruffell about his Oxford days, which introduced Tom Conti. Tom and his group were, again, very nice to me, and I had a little bit in that. And then I had a nice scene in a series called 10 from the 20s, where I worked with Billy Whitelaw and John Hurt. I learned a lot from these people. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to get into the TV commercial world. My first big commercial was one for Schweppes, which I've still got on my show reel. A funny commercial set in an off-licence with Keith Marsh and Rachel Davis. And that proved a great success and spawned me to get into the commercial world. If I fast forward into the 80s, I was very fortunate because I became the face, and I got a great deal of commercials along that period, which of course financed my life and my time as an actor and working in other areas of not such well-paid work. It was a balancing act between trying to develop my television career but also trying to hang on to my theatre career, which was very important to me. Fortunately, I was handled by a nice agent who kind of guided me in the right ways, and that led into different areas of work from the 70s into the 80s. The first West End show I did was Outside Edge, and that was in 79-80 at the Hampstead Theatre, and it was a clever, witty play about cricket by a writer called Richard Harris, who went on to write Stepping Out, 2 big hit plays. And that was really exciting because I was at Hampstead Theatre, and Hampstead Theatre, the late 70s, was buzzing. Very much the particular place where avant-garde and new theatre was going on. We went into the Queen's Theatre, had a nice run in the West End, and that was very exciting to be in the West End finally. In 1987, I was cast as the Reverend Crisparkle in The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This was a wonderful break for me, playing a major part in a big West End musical, which had already been an enormous hit in America. But unfortunately, the way it was translated to an English production didn't work. We lasted just a few months at the Savoy Theatre. I think the critics were a bit snooty about it being an American show. It didn't have the long run that I expected it to have, which was a great shame because I'd made a mark in that show and became very friendly with the writer, Rupert Holmes. The Mystery of Edwin Drood is unfinished. So the guy who wrote it decided that the audience would decide who the murderer was. And so they had to vote every night. And of course, generally speaking, they voted for the nasty vicar, which was great fun. The next West End show was The City of Angels, where I played the rather weird manservant, Dr. Mandrel. There's a nice story about that. The week before I was cast, I was playing Malvolio in an open-air production of Twelfth Night. The director was a guy called Leo Dolan. Leo was married to a big casting director called Sheila Mackintosh. Sheila Mackintosh was looking after an actor in City of Angels called Billy J. Mitchell. The notice had gone up on City of Angels. It wasn't quite getting the audience that it wanted. But suddenly, the day after the notice went up, the box office went mad and everybody wanted to see this show. And so the producers had second thoughts and decided that they weren't going to take it off after all. But by that time, some of the actors had already left the show and gone to find other work. So Sheila talked to her actor, Billy, and said, "Are there any actors that you know that are leaving the show?" And he said, "Yes, well, there's an actor called Geoffrey Rose who's not particularly happy, and this is a good excuse for him to leave the show." And she said, "I know the perfect actor to take over." And so she said, "Martin, get on to your agent now, and we'll see if we can get you an audition tomorrow." I went to see Michael Blakemore on Friday morning, and on Friday afternoon I was cast in the show. Tremendously excited to take over this wonderful role. And that led again to a nice little run in the West End. The next lovely break came with The Importance at the Old Vic. Now, as a teenager, I'd sat up in the gods, watching all these wonderful actors, Olivier, Gielgud, Richardson, Redgrave. And therefore, obviously, it was wonderful when I suddenly had the chance to audition for this production and to work with a very good director called Terry Hands, who was one of the main directors at the RSC. Terry taught me a lot. He was a very precise, detailed director who wanted everything absolutely correct. We opened at the Birmingham Repertory Theatre, and then we played at the Old Vic Theatre for a long time. It was a big success. I was playing the two butlers, a snooty butler at the beginning and then an old fuddy-duddy butler, Merriman in the second and third acts. And it gave me a chance to really develop my different characters. I did some lovely Dickensian work. I was in a TV series based on Micawber, playing Mr. Smee. And then I played Tom Codling in a TV film with Peter Ustinov, which we filmed in Dublin. Lovely chance to develop different characters. I'd always thought about doing some play or other about Wellington, and I'd been working on this for a long time. And finally I brought on a friend of mine, a director, Ellis Jones, who I'd worked with in R.I.P. Ellis was great, kind of knew where I was going with the character, but he said, "I need to do a bit of rewriting on your play, Martin, because it's not quite there yet." I trusted Ellis because I knew he was a good director, and I felt that he knew where I was going. So we found a great little fringe theatre in Fulham. We opened it in 1981. It was a two-hander with Sarah Sherborne playing Mary Sackville West, who was one of his confidants at the time, at the end of his life at Walmer Castle. and we developed a sort of play where she was sharing time with him and asking him questions, and then that developed into him reminiscing about big moments in his life. It was very, very successful. I got some great reviews from press. I remember one night we'd invited the Duke and Duchess of Wellington to see the play. They came to see it, along with the curator of the Apsley House and Lady Longford. All of them loved it. Lady Longford, I remember, writing me a lovely letter about it, and she'd written these great biographies of Wellington. So that particular production developed over the years, and I played it. Well, I remember I did it 2015, and then I think Ellis and I took it abroad, actually. He had a connection in a French theatre, so we took it over to France for a little run. So it developed into a long run, and that in turn brought me into presenting and producing my own one-man shows. I had the chance to work with Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady. And there were lots and lots of us. You can see me in the background grinning rather inanely. But I did have some time with Meryl Streep, chatting away to her, a very unaffected actress, same age as me, obviously masses of experience, but very friendly and engaging personality. Again, someone who completely steeped herself in the personality of the character. People say to me, "You must love Wellington." And I say, no, I don't love him, but I know him. And it's the same with Meryl, with The Iron Lady. I'm sure she didn't like Mrs. Thatcher, but she was obviously fascinated by her as a character. And of course, she had the power and the influence to create that movie about her. One of the pivotal moments of my acting work was done at the Finborough Theater. I was very fortunate in getting a lovely part in a play by Graham Greene called The Potting Shed, and I played the whiskey-drinking priest, Father Caliphate. He has only one scene in the play, but of course it's a wonderful scene, very dramatic with the main character. I loved playing this role. I felt one of those particular times when I inhabited the role completely. After The Potting Shed, I had one of those lovely experiences, one job follows another, and I was cast as the rather spooky Mr. Underwood in a big touring production of Lady in the Van with Nicola McAuliffe, whom I'd worked with many years ago in a commercial, so we had some fun reminiscing about that. There were a few other productions at the Finborough Theater. One was again a marvellous chance to play a great part, The Dream of Perfect Sleep, by an American writer called Kevin Kautzman. And then there was a play called Outward Bound by Sutton Vane, a lovely old-fashioned 20s play. And I was playing a rather mysterious passenger on the ship who was offering them advice. It's a sort of rather mystical, whimsical play, but it was rather good production, I thought. In fact, the director had seen me already in Potting Shed and offered me the role. These were wonderful experiences at the Finborough Theater, and I look back fondly at that time. It's rather like television, that Fringe Theatre, because it's so close up. You can't get away with anything, so you have to be really in the moment, and play the moment. I was thinking back to my time in Funny Turns, David Hampshire's play at the Jermyn Street Theatre, and I was fortunate enough to work with Joan Blackham. Joan, sadly, died too young. I was fortunate enough to work with her twice, Funny Turns at the Jermyn Street, as I say. And then we spent a happy week doing a performed reading of The Entertainer. And I'd always wanted to play Archie Rice, so this was my chance. Put it on myself, and I chose Joan to play Archie's rather put-upon wife, and had a lovely time. It was one of those lovely sort of ensemble companies where we all bounced off each other and really enjoyed being together. Throughout all this time, in the background has always been the Actors and Writers Group of London, we are brought together and bonded together as actors and writers in our desire to create interesting and creative and hopefully moving work. But it's also the sense that we are friends, and being friends is also very important. Often when actors are in a show, they talk about family, that sense of family. And I think that's so true of the actors and writers group. We are family, bonded together with our desire to create good work. Over the years, that work has led me down so many different routes and so many different plays and so many different experiences. I mean, I go right back further than Hammersmith to the Riverside Studios, where the group, originally the core group, was formed with Vivian Pickles and James Hogan, the writer. That kind of fizzled out as the Riverside Studios kind of fizzled out, and then was reborn at the Polish Centre and the Hammersmith Centre so many years ago. How many years ago was it? Sort of
30.
God, isn't it extraordinary how life flies by? So, you know, one looks back over those years with so many good experiences. It's difficult to pick out particular pieces. You have that intensity of performance. You're given a script, and on a Sunday afternoon you have to bring it off the page, and then on the Monday evening you have to present it to an audience. This is a very good experience for an actor. I got the tail end of repertory theatre. There was one time when I was at Eastbourne, we did weekly rep. And you know, you perform one play and you rehearse another. And it was really intense. And it's almost very similar to that you have to create a performance quickly. You don't have the chance to broaden it out and find the subtleties. But at the same time, you are galvanized to give a performance, which brings it off the page and helps the writer to see it in a different way. That's the great skill and the great need for that group. So I've always felt a connection with it, and I've always been very touched by the friendships I've made within it, which have meant a great deal to me. And now that I'm having to deal with this condition and having to step back from the business, and I'm afraid step back from AWL, I still very much feel connected with it about my condition. It's called Motor Neurone Disease. It's a wasting of the muscle, unfortunately, of the body. I became aware of it last year when I went to various consultants. I'd been aware that my body was quite weak. After a long deal of consultations, they came out with the realization that I had this condition. Now, I've always been a very positive person, and I've always believed that you have to deal with the situations that you're given. Maybe looking right back, this was drilled into me by my mother, who always used to say, "Rise above it, Martin." I felt that I had to rise above it. And of course, I've been so lucky with Marie, who's helped me so much and been by my side and got me through this difficult period. How it will develop, I just do not know. The old cliche that so many of the doctors say is it's everybody goes on a different journey, Martin. I would really hate to think that I would end up like dear Rob Burrows, completely sort of paralysed. So I don't know, to be honest. My cognitive brain is fine, and my speech is okay. I still regard myself as an actor, even though I may not be doing it at the moment. I still love putting on little local shows at Rye Community Centre, and I think I'm going to put on a Christmas show soon with my friends. I love putting shows together. It's one of my delights. I've recently done a show about Betjeman and Larkin called Meeting of Minds, which gave me great pleasure, and I love reading poetry. So life is full, but it's full in a different way, and it's busy in a different way, not running around. One of my great heroes is Fred Astaire, and he was once asked, "What do you do?" And he said, "I don't know, but I never have time to do it." I'm always going here, thither and thither. There's always a project one 103-year-old lady was asked the inevitable question, and she said, always wake up with a project. And I think as actors and writers, we're always waking up with projects. We have these ideas, these characters, all in our minds, the ideas for possibly a different show. It's rather nice that we come back together as a group with our AWL group. We go off, we do our little bits, and then we come back again. And it's rather like coming back after a term has ended and you meet up with your same group. And as I say, sometimes if we're not physically there, we know that we are connected with each other. And I have been extremely touched by the lovely comments and feedback that I've had from everybody at AWL. That's really been extraordinarily moving for me. Although I may not physically be able now to make it at the moment, I'm still with you. I'm still connected to you. And although I have to move slower now, I'm still tremendously interested. I'm still tremendously curious about the world, about what's going on, about human affairs, about current affairs. I love watching good work. Whether one's on the National Theatre stage or in the back room of a pub, it's the work. That's the yardstick of success. That's always been my desire, my feeling for doing it right, getting it right, and learning from the best. It's like that great quote from Hamlet, "This above all till thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." And it's so true. I'm a bit weak, and it's frustrating that I don't have that physical energy, but I have the energy of my mind, and I have the energy of my desire to keep on and enjoying good work in my own particular way. And it's been lovely, Paddy, for you to allow me that chance to speak.